Dear viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program, Spectra. The Ontario Liberal Party is Canada's oldest political party that started back in the middle of the 19th century. It is also the party that spearheaded the political scene during the end of the 20th century and during the first 2 decades of the 21st century. In 2018, they lost their seat and they lost their position as the leading political party in Ontario, and they lost their majority. So why did this happen? And what sort of changes are needed? What is the Liberal Party of Ontario responsible for? And what is the connection between the federal and provincial Liberal parties? To answer these questions and much more, and to discuss many allegations about the Liberal Party of Ontario, I'm really delighted to host Nate Erskine-Smith, who is a lawyer by profession, an MP since 2015, and the prospective leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. Nate, hello and welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure. And to start off, many people are wondering, what is missing in the Liberal Party of Ontario at the provincial level?
Well, over the last 15 plus years, I'd say over the last 20 years now, the Liberal Party was in power for 15 of those years. But over the last period of the last 5 years, it's been a really rough road for the Liberal Party. And in part because, and I would argue, we have to get back to basics. We have to rebuild volunteer engagement. We have to rebuild a connection to grassroots volunteers and grassroots members and make sure we're properly listening and probably reflecting concerns. I don't just mean in the GTA. I'm in the East End of Toronto and you're in the West End. It's all across the province. The Liberal Party at its best reflects and represents all of Ontario.
And just to clarify something for some of our viewers here, the Liberal Party is usually seen as standing on the center or center left. Is this how you personally see the Liberal Party?
In many ways, yes. I reflect on my experience in federal politics. I was first elected in 2015 with the federal Liberal Party, and then we've been in government in part because of the great success and great support we've had here in Ontario. And our message has been, we are there to look after those in need. We're there to build infrastructure. We're there to deliver a strong, serious, credible climate agenda. We're there to deliver for seniors and families with kids, but we are also there to do so with a lens of fiscal sustainability and with a strong economic agenda at the same time. And the Liberal Party is at its best when we have a strong economic agenda and fiscal discipline at the same time as we have a compassionate and fair agenda for both the middle class as well as those in greater need.
And do you think the Liberal Party deviated from this sort of steadfast path during the past couple of years?
I think when I reflect on the 15 years that the provincial Liberal Party was in power, decisions are made over those 15 years. Some are, I think, incredibly important when you look at full day kindergarten, when you look at phasing out coal-fired electricity. But there were obviously more challenging decisions over those 15 years. There were frustrations grow as governments are in power. So I've certainly heard loud and clear from members that they want us to get back to basics, get back to the center in that way, get back to that strong balance. I've also heard, though, that part of getting back to that middle ground also means that we don't lecture people, that we bring people along, that we advance fairness without sort of criticizing people, and that I personally think what makes politics so powerful is it's one of the most important ways we make a difference in the lives of those around us. But to be effective, we have to persuade and we have to bring people along with us. We can't be seen to sort of, the greatest weakness of the Liberal Party is that the Achilles heel sometimes is that sense of arrogance. And we have to get away from that and get back to the grassroots connection, I think.
So you think the Liberal Party was sort of patronizing people in one way or another?
At different points, I worry about this, about the federal and provincial level. I think we have to make sure that we are communicating our values and we're convincing and persuading people, but we're also meeting people where they're at and listening at the same time. And I think there was a worry, whether it's real or perceived. I think it doesn't matter in politics. Perception sometimes becomes reality. And so we have to make sure that we are very clear in articulating what we stand for. And I would say it's competence, seriousness, a strong economic agenda. It is fairness and compassion, and it is honesty and integrity. Those are the values that make me a liberal.
Definitely. Now, what are you bringing to offer? Like, what do you think you need to offer to sort of boost the Liberal Party, to bring it back to life again, to have it standing on its feet?
So I would say three things. One is we need a charismatic leader, someone who brings experience, brings effective advocacy, also is able to motivate new people to enter into the party, to see politics the way I see it, as a way of making a huge difference, especially young people getting involved in politics. You need that charisma and excitement to make sure people understand the answer is participation. I think two, and we've talked about this, that we have to make sure we don't cede an economic agenda and fiscal discipline and building infrastructure and housing to conservatives, and then we don't cede fairness and compassion to the NDP. We can do both, and we can do so with integrity and honesty. And honestly, beyond that, it's making sure we deliver on the core issues that matter to so many Ontarians, whether it's Northern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, here in the GTA, access to primary care, housing affordability, just building more supply, making sure that we're protecting our environment for our kids and creating jobs. These are common issues that come up no matter where I am, and we need to make sure we're speaking to those issues and delivering on those issues, and reminding ourselves healthcare and education are the two things that impact families the most, and they're the two things that matter most at the provincial level of politics.
Okay, so talking about the personal side here, what kind of qualifications do you think you'll bring to the Liberal Party if you're chosen? So right now you're a candidate, but if you're chosen as the leader, the new leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, what kind of personal qualifications and experience do you have?
So I'm not even a candidate yet because the race isn't underway, but I'm actively building a team towards a potential leadership run. And I woke up in June after the provincial election, another tough election, and I thought, I turned 38 in June, but I have 7 years of experience in Parliament. I was a lawyer, a commercial litigation lawyer before politics. I studied politics and law at both Queen's and at Oxford, and I have a strong background when it comes to experience. I'm also of an age, though, and when I think of what the party needs, it needs generational renewal. I got involved in federal politics. There was a generational renewal in federal politics 10 years ago. We need that same renewal at the provincial level now, and I'm able to deliver on that. I also have a really strong track record in Parliament of working across party lines, of being a little bit less partisan, but being effective in delivering, not only working with party members from other parties, but also working within my own caucus to help shape the government's agenda. And when the Prime Minister made a commitment back in 2013 to do politics a bit differently, I certainly took him up on that. And I have a track record, I think, of integrity in politics that is going to really matter.
Okay, so actually this brings us to another very important question, is how different is the Liberal Party at the provincial, versus the federal level? Because now you're switching from the federal to the provincial one. And so first part of my question is, what was the enticement or incentive for doing that shift? Second of all, how different is the mandate here, or how much can you affect the layman through being a leader of the Liberal Party versus just an MP at the federal level?
Yeah, it's both good questions, and the answer to both is very similar, because I left my law career 10 years ago to run a nomination and to hustle. And I would say the other value I bring is we have a very strong political organization, and we're pretty good at this when it comes to winning elections. But I left law for politics 10 years ago. Why? Serious grassroots renewal, and we had a very frustrating Conservative majority government in Stephen Harper. Fast forward 10 years, and the parallels apply at the provincial level. We have a Liberal Party in third place in need of serious renewal, and we have a very frustrating, and I describe it as incompetent populism, but a very frustrating Conservative majority government with Doug Ford, and not delivering on the issues that matter to so many people. So that core question, how does one make the biggest difference in one's life and one's career? I can't think of a bigger difference than dedicating myself to rebuilding this party and delivering change at Queen's Park. And especially to the second part of your question, when you think of the issues that matter in our daily lives. I've had great success federally, whether it is on the subject of mental health and addictions. I've had great success changing the way we think about poverty reduction, including increasing income supports for working age Canadians. I've had great success in advancing a serious, credible climate action. And there are so many of these issues that apply at the provincial level. But when you have a leadership role, you're able to affect a much, much, much more significant change. So there's unquestionably an appeal to that. And then when you think about access to primary care and housing affordability, there are ways of really making a difference at the provincial level, because the provincial level is much more responsible for delivering on those core concerns.
Okay, now moving to some of the allegations here. And again, I'll be playing the role of the devil's advocate here. So again, a lot of people say that, the Liberal Party always promises, great things, but sometimes it's just too good to be true. But when the time comes for delivery, they hardly deliver half of what they promise. What do you say to that? Like, are they just smooth operators?
No, I would say two things. One, I have my own track record that I'm going to run on, and I will run on a track record of integrity. I have done what I said I was going to do in Ottawa. I have not broken promises at any time. And even where the party has at times moved away from a promise like electoral reform, I was one of two Liberals to vote for that because it's something we promised people. So I think integrity matters a great deal, and I will be able to run a very strong campaign around that value. When it comes to party politics, though, and governments being in power, have we delivered on absolutely everything? I was, to be honest, I would say no. We've promised pharmacare, for example, and we haven't seen that through. There are certain obvious broken promises, including electoral reform, including reforming the access to information system as we promised to do. Having said that, when you think of big picture issues, so the Canada Child Benefit, childcare. I had a woman come up to me at a New Year's levy and say she's saving $2,000 a month right now because of the childcare investments we've made. We've lifted many seniors out of poverty by increasing GIS and OAS, the Canada Workers Benefit that I mentioned. So sometimes I think the greater challenge, and housing is a really good example of this, sometimes in politics, we overstate the case, or we say this is a historic investment and it might take years for it to pay off. And I think sometimes we have to pull back and say, let's be very honest with people about when this is going to affect their lives. We enhance the Canada Pension Plan. It's a very good thing to do. Okay. It's not going to impact my grandparents. It's not going to impact my parents. It's going to impact my kids, and it's going to impact my brother. And we should be honest about who our policies impact instead of overstating the case. But on many issues, the core issues, I'd say the Liberal government has come through at the federal level in a really significant way.
Okay, so another very thing that many people think about, is the problem really only in the leadership, or is it in the grassroots? Like, is there do we have just to change the leadership? Is that all that it takes, or much more is needed than that?
No, it doesn't just take changing the leadership, but changing leadership does matter a great deal. We do need change at the top, because at the end of the day, if you want to change the culture of a party, if you want to rebuild the grassroots, so much does depend on the leader. Having said that, there's no substitute for hard work, and that means grassroots engagement and accountability to that grassroots. So when we look at a leadership campaign, and that's one way to rebuild our grassroots, there will also be open competitive nominations if I'm leader, and that will be another way to rebuild the grassroots. But in my riding, we have a very strong riding association, and I'm accountable to that riding association. I meet with my local Liberals on a regular basis. I answer their emails, I answer their calls. There's an accountability there that really matters when you are building a team. And we need to take that same approach absolutely everywhere. If we're able to build across the province, I'm confident we will be able to. But what we've been able to build in Beaches East York, we are going to be effective and we're going to be successful. But not every riding association across this province is as strong as the one in Beaches East York. There's a lot of hard work ahead to build them.
Okay, so now a very common allegation towards the Liberal Party in general, like the federal and both of the provincial levels, is, everybody knows that, equality rights and gender rights, these are totally secured, and it's a human right, it's a constitutional right for every Canadian citizen. But some people tend to accuse the Liberal Party of advocating specific genders over others to gain more popularity amongst them.
So I'm not entirely sure I understand the allegation in full, because what I've seen in politics over the last 7 years, since 2015, is, and it's not just the Liberal Party, I see conservatives like Michelle Rempel, and I've seen members of the NDP, I've seen members of the Green Party. Many of us are there to stand up for equality rights and to stand up for human rights, and to say sometimes well-intentioned policies discriminate unintentionally, and in other cases politicians come and in a very intentionally discriminatory way to try to advance discriminatory policies, and we're seeing much of that in the United States right now, and we see in other countries as well, whether it's certain religions get targeted or certain people with particular sexual orientations are targeted. And so I think we very much have to take a step back and say, how do we as legislators, how do we as a society protect equality? And that has to be the line in the sand. Absolutely.
Now, something that many people don't understand is that everything comes from the Constitution. So like there is a limit to the mandate of any party. So like, please correct me if I'm wrong. Can one party say, okay, you know what, tomorrow, no, like we're not giving equal rights to genders. It's our choice of the party.
No, so I studied constitutional law and political philosophy. And my thesis was actually around the Canadian Charter when I was doing my thesis at Oxford. And we have a very strong sense of individual rights in this country and strong legal protections for those individual rights because of the enshrinement of the Charter in our Constitution. Yeah. And that Charter protects religious rights, it protects our rights of free expression, and it protects rights in relation to equality. And you cannot discriminate based on religion, you can't discriminate based on race, you can't discriminate based on sexual orientation. And that tracks back to core legal obligations. I would argue important values as well, liberal values, but legal obligations as well.
Absolutely. So it's irrespective of who's in power, really. Like, these are secured by the Canadian Constitution, by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So like, it's not a matter, like, if I don't like a specific gender, then if I change the political party, this will never change the scene, because this is part and parcel of the Canadian human rights, and it's part and parcel of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Exactly, and as it should be. I mean, the whole idea is majorities and democracies make decisions based on majority decision, and that is a wonderful thing most of the time. But you don't want the tyranny of the majority, where a majority starts to point at a small minority, whether it's a religious minority in a particular context, or whether it is a minority for another reason. And you don't want a majority to discriminate against those minorities. You need strong legal protections, rule of law, charter protections. You need those protections to really protect all minority rights, whether it's language rights, religious rights, rights around people who have different genders. It is incredibly important that we have those protections at law, and we don't have politicians who try to weaponize them. Because if you start to break down those minority protections, those protections of minority rights, you never know who's going to be the victim next.
And a lot of people again say that maybe the Liberal Party is advocating a specific religion, to name it Islam, more than other religions, and they're trying to like sort of patronize or like play with words to attract more Muslims to vote for them, and they specifically in the GTA area.
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I first started in politics, I represent a riding that does have a significant Muslim population, but I'm not Muslim myself, obviously, and I'm frankly not particularly religious, but I do care a great deal about those equality rights and religious rights and making sure we have those protections in place. I volunteered for the Canadian Civil Liberties Association back when I was starting out in my legal career. And people may remember that politics has weaponized itself at times, and it's usually conservative politics, against certain religious minorities, including as against Muslims. And so C-51 at the time was being pushed by the conservative government. It was sort of anti-terror legislation. It was overbroad. It clearly was focused on targeting one particular religious minority in Muslim communities. And so I was very vocal at the time to defend those individual rights and to say we should vote against C-51 and we should fix it. Since that time, we've seen, especially in Quebec, but other political actors really focus on sort of, values and, you shouldn't be wearing this article of clothing or that article of clothing, even though they've been, these are pieces of clothing. They're not just pieces of clothing. They're deeply connected to one's religious beliefs and living the religious life that one wants to live. And so again, that core question of how do we protect minority rights? How do we protect people's ability to live as they want to live and that sense of individuality? What I have seen in my politics is, yes, of course, myself included, I've stood up for Palestinian human rights. I've stood up for the rights of Rohingya refugees. I've stood up for, stood beside my colleague Ikra Khalid against Islamophobia. But it's been necessary at times, given some of the attacks we've seen, some of the vitriol we've seen in politics. And so it's at times that core question of equality leads you to advocate for certain communities in particular instances. But when I take a step back, the Liberal Party, liberal values, don't prefer one religion over another. They don't prefer one community over another. The whole message is equality. And it's about individual rights and freedom, and it's about equality. And those are the two most important values, and those are values we have to defend.
Because, like some people might argue, like there was a lot of talk about like burning of mosques and attacks on mosques, but the same thing happened to some of the churches. And the Liberal Party talked about it, but in a more like sort of subtle, discreet manner. It wasn't that overt like when it talked about mosques.
My own experience has been, I have probably myself been more sensitive to attacks against Muslim communities because they are a minority community in comparison to sort of Judeo-Christian religions in this country. But especially because in our politics, when that motion came forward to condemn Islamophobia, if it had been to condemn anti-Semitism, it would have passed unanimously. But because it was Islamophobia and there was a conservative leadership race going on at the time, conservative politics descended into incredible nastiness. And so I think in the legislature and the debates that I've witnessed, at least in the 7 years I've been doing this, it has been certain communities that have been less forcefully defended than others. And so I think that's where I'm most sensitive to. I think you make a good point that if we see an attack, whether it's on a synagogue or we see an attack on a Christian church or we see an attack on a mosque, we should condemn those attacks equally. Those are all heinous attacks on people practicing their own faiths. In the same way, if we see someone attacked for being indigenous, or we see someone attacked for being black, or someone attacked for being Asian, it shouldn't matter. That underlying racism is what is heinous, and it shouldn't matter the color of one's skin. And so I think we just have to remember what the core values are. And if people see us at times defending or condemning Islamophobia, it's partly because we haven't seen that unison in the House that we should be seeing, and we want to push to make sure it is unanimous at all times.
And again, a lot of people would say that, the Liberal Party just tends to give people what they want, not what they need. So basically, okay, you want drugs, there you have it. Everything is legal. Again, they're promoting sex education just to make the kids happy. Again, what do you say to that?
I'd say a few things. One is harm reduction is an incredibly important thing to understand from a public health perspective, that people are going to consume alcohol. Let's take alcohol as an example. Mm-hmm. We had prohibition of alcohol once upon a time. It didn't work. You know what it did? It actually made things worse. People were dying of it. We had major organized crime. There were major social problems, and we didn't solve the problem just by waving our finger and saying we're going to prohibit something. Yeah. We have to understand that people are going to engage in certain activities, and we have to reduce the risks. We have to educate and regulate. and strictly regulate at times, depending upon the harmful activity or the harmful substance at issue. And so when it comes to cannabis legalization, let's say, well, it should not be a free-for-all. We should not have commercial advertising. We should not be advertising to kids. We should not be advertising in public, generally speaking. We should, with cigarettes, we actually moved away from allowing that kind of commercial advertising. And I think we've taken a more public health focused approach when it comes to cannabis. There are still challenges. We still need to make sure we get it right, of course, and learn along the way. But that was better than prohibition, where it was easier to access in some ways during prohibition than it is now. And you have dosage controls and strong regulation. When it comes to sex education, there are core things we need to teach our kids around consent. For example, I've got 2 young boys. I want them to learn the value of consent to make sure they respect women. I want young women to be raised understanding consent in a clear-faced way, so they're going to be protected and they can defend themselves, and they know who to go to it when a young male or an older male is disrespecting that consent. Mm-hmm. So I think there are core values we have to teach people, just as we've talked about equality. We have to teach values of freedom, individual rights, and equality. Do I think, I wasn't there at the time, but based on all the conversations I've had, do I think that we effectively brought people along to that conversation? I think clearly not. When you saw some of the reactionary outcry and some of the misinformation, I think clearly the Liberal government of the day could have done a much better job of sitting down with different communities and saying, here are the goals that we want to reach. Mm-hmm. Help us reach those goals and give us feedback along the way, and make it a constructive dialogue rather than this is what we're going to do no matter what. And my own view of politics is oftentimes, and drug decriminalization is a really good example. I've advocated to treat drug use as a health issue, to say too many people are dying in the opioid crisis. We need to save lives. We need to follow police chiefs and medical experts, and we need to make sure that we are treating this as a health issue, not a criminal justice issue. In some communities, I've heard, well, what do you mean? You want drugs on the street corner? This is terrifying. And every time I sit down, I say, that's not at all what I mean. I mean, we want to make sure people get the help that they need. We support mental health and addictions treatment. We make sure people are moved out of the criminal justice system. We shouldn't treat patients as criminals. We got to treat patients as patients. And when I sit down and explain it, everyone goes, yeah, of course, that makes sense. And oftentimes you just have to sit down together, talk things through, and bring people along to the right answer. But overwhelmingly, I think that the goal has to be a recognition of reality and then a goal to reduce harms.
Again, the issue of refugees. So central Canada and Ontario in particular, and then the GTA tends to attract most of the new immigrants. And here we're talking about refugees. So a lot of people accuse the Liberal Party of having this open arm policy towards all the refugees, but at the same time, this would be at the expense of the Canadian citizens. And we have a lot of new graduates who can hardly find a job. A lot of people have lost their jobs too. A lot of people are suffering from low income. Again, a lot of people are saying that there's a lot of reduction again, and vetting even for different sorts of benefits.
Yeah, I was knocking on doors in Hamilton in the by-election recently, and someone at the doorstep, clearly a conservative, but said to me, you're sending money to countries I've never even heard of, and you got to look after people at home. But when you look at the underlying math, the math doesn't bear that argument out in any way whatsoever. So we spend, as an example, $60 billion on seniors, direct benefits, that's old age security, and that's the guaranteed income supplement. We spend $30 billion on families with kids through the Canada Child Benefit, which since 2015 has lifted over 400,000 kids out of poverty. So there are major expenditures we make, and you look at the recent health accords, and there's going to be another $40 some odd billion dollars on top of the planned expenditures. So I think it's $200 billion in federal spending over the next 10 years. So there's major spending on domestic priorities, and overwhelmingly, that is how we spend our federal tax dollars. Of a budget that is about $350 billion, they were bigger in COVID era, again, looking after domestic concerns and looking after Canadians here and helping bridge people, individuals and businesses through the pandemic. But when you look at the total spending, a tiny fraction is for any measures that are overseas. So Lester B. Pearson, the beloved Liberal Prime Minister and Canadian, he called for hitting a 0.7% of GDP on spending on international assistance. We spend less than half that. So people should understand sort of the numbers and where we start at. And when it comes to refugees, look, I think there's a real challenge around our immigration levels and our housing needs. So I think we shouldn't shy away from that very difficult conversation. We're bringing in 500,000 people into this country a year, and we need to make sure that housing starts match that incoming population growth. We look at the stresses in Peel, or you look at the stresses in Barrie, or you look at the stresses in Ajax. Our infrastructure is not growing fast enough.
How about hospital beds as well?
Exactly. Hospital beds, our transportation infrastructure, our housing, all infrastructure is not growing at a pace to keep pace with population growth. And that population growth is largely driven not by refugees, but by immigration, and necessary immigration, people reuniting with their loved ones, especially economic immigration. So I think the real question is to sit down. Provinces need to sit down with the federal government. Federal government says, these are our targets to bring people in. And yes, 10%, less than 10% is for humanitarian reasons, but overwhelmingly it's for economic reasons. We need people here. We have a gray tsunami. People are growing older, and we don't have enough people domestically to pick up the slack. We need immigration, but it's not good enough to just bring people in if we don't plan for it. We need housing, we need hospitals, we need schools, and we need transportation infrastructure. Otherwise, people are going to start really pushing back against those strong immigration targets that we need. So collectively, we need to manage this program, which means to say, bring people into the country. Let's be welcoming. It's good for our economy, but let's make sure we build infrastructure at the same time to match the population growth.
Exactly. Now, my last question here, before I'd ask you to sort of speak to our viewers directly, is for the youth who are watching us right now, and people who are not members of the Liberal Party of Ontario. What benefit is it for me to be a member of the Liberal Party of Ontario, and for the youth as well? Like, how much space is there for the youth to be part of the Liberal Party and to grow into the Liberal Party?
There is a huge opportunity to make a difference right now. And when you look at the Provincial Liberal Party and where it is at and where it needs to go, we need so many more people to see politics as a way of making a difference. And there is a huge opportunity to make a difference through politics in a leadership process. So it is free to join the Ontario Liberal Party. We changed rules at this recent AGM, and it was exciting. There was a huge amount of energy, momentum. There were 1,500 people there, but they were delegates. We have moved away from a delegated system. Everyone is going to be able to sign up for free and vote directly for the next leader. And so if you care about politics, and frankly, if you don't even know you care about politics, I go into classrooms and I say, put up your hand if you care about politics, and nobody puts up their hand. But after an hour of describing, if you ride public transit, or if you're frustrated with the congestion on the roads, if you don't feel safe in your community, if you can't afford a home, if you want to protect the environment for your kids, if you want to make sure that kids are leaving school prepared to succeed in life, and we have excellence in education, if you care about poverty reduction, whatever you might care about in your life, it always tracks back to politics. And so if you want to make a difference, politics is the best way to make a difference, and having a direct say in who the next leader is going to be is an incredible opportunity and a reason for joining this political party at this moment in time.
Again, please correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm just a permanent resident, I'm not a citizen of Canada, can I join the Liberal Party and vote for the next leader?
You can. So it is not limited to citizens, but so permanent residents are able to participate. And, shameless plug, but for those who are interested in joining or who have questions, you can go to meetnate.ca and find out more information there and come to participate, because ultimately the answer is participation.
Perfect. Okay, now I'd like you to speak to our viewers here. I'll just give you your free time here to speak directly to our viewers. What is the message you want to, what is the last thing you want them to remember here?
I want them to remember that there's a huge opportunity to make a difference if they get involved. And that is why I am getting involved in this race right now, that there has never been a more important opportunity. I want seriousness in our politics. Everyone is busy with their own lives. You don't have time to look over your shoulder every day and read the news and say, what are they doing next? The chaos in building housing, the mismanagement of our hospitals, the mistreatment of education workers that meant that we weren't clear if schools were going to stay open, the promise to protect the Greenbelt, and then walking away from that promise mere weeks after an election. This is it's so frustrating. It is so incredibly frustrating. We deserve better from our politics. And if you want better from your politics, it means getting involved. And very clearly, we need someone experienced. We need someone charismatic. We need someone who has experience in politics, who's ready to deliver. But we also need change. We need serious renewal. We need someone who's not connected to the past provincial party, someone who's going to chart a new course. And I would argue generational renewal. And for me, it's very simple. It is a strong economic agenda. It is seriousness and it is competence, and it is fairness and it's compassion and it's honesty and it's integrity. And if you care about those values, then you should join us. And if you care about tackling the big issues of the day, excellence in the education system for our kids, access to primary care, mental health and addictions, fixing our healthcare system and competently managing our healthcare system, building supply. So I would say on housing, let's get governments out of the way so developers can build market supply, and let's get governments back in building social housing, housing for those who truly can't afford their own housing, whether it's co-op housing or other social housing. There are so many big picture problems we're going to be able to solve together, but we have to do it together. So again, meetnate.ca, and I hope you're ready to get involved.
Well, Nate Erskine-Smith, thank you very much for joining us here and for providing us with all these, great insights. Wish you all the best, and we wish may the best candidate win, which is at the end, it's a win-win situation for all of us here as Ontarians. Thank you very much again, and all the best.
Thank you.
So, dear viewers, again, it's stereotypes. If you want to know something, please go to the source. So propaganda and stereotyping, these are part and parcel of our daily life, unfortunately. But if you want to get to the core of something, if you want to have the insight, then go to the source, please. So there's always these official sites for the Liberal Party. They have open door policy. You can always speak to your MPPs. You can always, be a member of the Liberal Party as well. And again, first and foremost, you must understand what Canada is all about. So we have the rule of law here in Canada. And there's something called the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So nobody can do anything against these. So it's not the change of the party that will make the difference with regards to the major values we have here in Canada, but it's how to deal with what we have. And we already have a lot, actually, but it's the proper tactics. And we definitely need new blood because, life never stops. And that's why we all have children, because we always need new blood. We always need new blood. And again, speaking of immigrants, Canada is built on immigration. So all those people who are against immigration, they were immigrants one day. If not them, then it was one of their ancestors. So again, without immigration, we won't have this beautiful Canada that you and I enjoy. Dear viewers, until we meet again, I hope you have a very pleasant time. Thanks for watching.